Welcome everyone to the Extraordinary Coaches podcast. Today I'm here with Myles Downey. I know Myles for not that long actually, but I knew his books right at the beginning of my coaching journey. I read 2 of his books and they were sort of the driving force that made me get into coaching as well. It helped me excel my process. And currently I have the pleasure to be joined by Myles. I know you've been a guest on multiple podcasts and you've shared your story everywhere. But would you please shortly introduce yourself in the way that you'd like to?
That's the most difficult question you could ask. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me. The heart of the matter is that I have been for many, many years, mostly unknowingly and then laterally more knowingly, interested, driven by what it takes for people to express themselves in the world. I think that in part comes from being brought up in Ireland, where the Catholic Church held sway for so long that you kind of the job of society seemed to be to suppress and cause people to comply, and some deep part of me knew that wasn't okay, and somewhere along that, as I did my compliant thing, and kind of went and studied architecture, I read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis by a guy called Tim Galway. That book will be 50 years in publication next June, so there'll be a bit of a celebration about that, I believe. It was like I turned each page, and it was kind of answering the question that had occurred to me on the previous page. So it was, and it absolutely spoke to what it takes to be yourself in the world, to express yourself in the world, and the satisfaction that goes with that. And really that's driven everything. That caused me to meet some people that I was in Dublin when I read the book. I ended up in London meeting some people who had been trained by Galway. Me as a very junior partner, set up an outfit called the Alexander Corporation, which was the first place you could coach, first executive coaching house. And then about within 10 years of that, I'd set up the School of Coaching, which was the first place we could train to be a coach. And so that was noticed, and somebody asked me to write the book, and it's gone from there. Just everything has kind of unfolded to it, not without effort. but there's been a path to it, and it's all been driven by that same thing, just the vital curiosity, interest, drive to help people express themselves.
I like what you mentioned there. You said that it's without effort, not without effort.
Yeah.
From the outside, things like this look as if they're effortless. And I feel like, to me, when I know that I'm on the right path in life, it does feel effortless. How did you keep going, even though there was like effort in it? Sometimes that resistance can be assigned to people that they're not on the right path, but you kept going. What's that like? How did you move through that resistance?
I think that resistance can exist in a number of places, and it can sometimes be within yourself. So you're going against your own grain. You're going against your own sense of purpose. You're going against your own direction of travel, and if you can spot that, then change direction. There's another part when the obstacles are external, or when there aren't external obstacles. I think one of the things that I've learned at an individual level and a business level, which is that if the landscape isn't right, it's very difficult to move through it. If the landscape is right and congruent, then you can move through it. So setting up the School of Coaching was really interesting because I created a landscape. I partnered with an outfit that already had some credibility in the marketplace. It was also a charity, which meant that people looked kindly upon it, and that allowed us to set up the first School of Coaching anywhere, as far as I know. So Not many people know this. There's a word in English, serendipity, which refers to things that happen apparently by chance. But what people don't know is that the word serendipity comes from the name of a city, which we currently call Sri Lanka, and before that called Ceylon, and before that was Serendip. And Serendip was on the Silk Road. So of course good things happened in Serendip because it was on the Silk Road. People bumped into each other like, pinball machines. It was just, so lots of stuff was happening. So if you want to be successful, pitch your tent in Serendip.
I love that. Yeah, you shared that story before when we when we first met. I love that because it's a beautiful term, and I didn't even know the word existed.
Yeah, well, but following from that, which is that that so I was in I set up a mobile. I did this. I participated in a mobile learning platform startup, and it's been very, very successful. And I've moved out of that because my job has been done. I'm still a partner, but my primary job has been done. And I'm looking at the coaching landscape right now, and both in the UK and more globally, it's really, really tough. The people are not spending the money they used to spend. Corporations are not spending money. HR seems to have kind of lost its voice, so it doesn't have the power to get people onto training programs that they ideally would be on. So it's very difficult to find Serendip in order to pitch your tent there, and so the next step in that is, well, hell, build Serendip. So how do you do that? Well, there's speaking to you, there's LinkedIn, there's editing one of my books and sending it out in the world again. There's all kinds of things you can do to create Serendip, but it takes time.
Yeah, because
that's what I meant by the effort piece.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is something that I wanted to get into a bit as well. Even before the call, I was thinking about like when you got into this coaching field, it was completely new, sort of like you said, the school of coaching. Things like that didn't exist, and now that I'm here, I'm getting into it, and everything already exists. Like there is already a way to do it, and to differentiate yourself in the world of coaching right now. Well, you can say that that's crazy difficult because there's so much like things going on. How would you say that you can? What do you think is the best way to build Serendip again in this year that we're in?
I think one of the is this maybe too specific an answer, so we can broaden it out if we need to. But in the world of coaching, we have created for ourselves a significant problem, which is that the people that govern coaching, so people in ICF and International Coach Federation or EMCC, European Mentoring and Coaching Council, good people with good intentions. So I'm not questioning anybody, and some good work being done. But there's an inherent problem in any organization like that, which is that in order to have a voice, you have to have membership. So you're immediately an inclusive organization. And the problem with that is that you're including people who maybe you shouldn't. There's to move up the ranks of an ICF coach to whatever the top rank is. There's no scrutiny of that. Nobody actually watches your practice and says, excuse me, what are you doing? So we've created a world in which you can almost get by saying the right things and by spending enough time saying the right things. Two, we've got and there's kind of a 2A and a 2B. So there's a major problem with what I'm not going to say is that coaching. I've worked with people like the New Zealand rugby coaches and the coaches to the England rugby team, and I've worked with people who are launching businesses, and so my version of coaching is that it's about delivering results in the world. If the people that I spoke with in the rugby world saw a lot of the coaching that goes on, that they would be wondering as to why it's quite so nurturing and almost therapeutic in nature. Not that that's a bad thing, but but the trouble is that it's the only thing. So and here's what it then immediately creates a problem, which is that if your focus is developmental as a coach, any connection with kind of ROI, or return on investment, is difficult to make and inconclusive. So it's really difficult then to sell that at the senior levels. I think in the UK and London, that the senior people who used to be 10, 15 years ago would have had coaches. They don't have them anymore because they didn't make a difference. They may have made them feel better, but they didn't turn the business around. They didn't help them turn the business around, or have a quantum jump in sales or whatever it was. So with a developmental focus on coaching, it's very difficult to show the impact of what you've done.
Yeah.
So my one of the ways in which I'm trying to build Serendip is to actually restate what coaching is about. It's about getting results.
How do you do that?
With great difficulty. So if you start looking at my LinkedIn posts over the last little while, and one that went out yesterday, I asked two questions, which is what's the difference between, or what do elite sport performers and elite business achievers, high achievers in business, have in common that allows them to be successful? And then what's different was the second question. So I'm trying to build a story about performance, because what eventually that will get to is, so why do elite sports people have coaches and high achievers in business not? So I'm doing that, and I'm well down the path in putting together some kind of an association of people who are interested in performance coaching, or what I call leader performance coaching. So and again, you started this with the great observation, or hearing something I said and pulling it out, which is that these things require effort, and the question for the person is the effort congruent with what the landscape is going to allow, or can you change the landscape, and is it congruent with what your sense of direction is?
I like that. You touch upon so many things, and I'm like, what do I want to get into? Because it's valuable what you're saying. I really, really appreciate that, and that you're sharing it. I like what you said in the beginning about how currently we're building things, or what I heard from it is, let's say, for example, in our society today, if you would start something like the School of Coaching, it would be considered successful if you have more members, which would mean that people are going to look for more members, and not per se, like, they're going to look for quantity instead of quality. And I think that's a huge thing going on in the coaching world right now, where there's educations done for coaching that are just built on getting as many people in, instead of built on getting the right people in there. And I think that's an interesting thing.
We had many years ago, my wife gave me a gift, which was a day's gliding, kind of sailplanes. And I continued that until I just couldn't find enough time to continue learning, because it takes a while. But when you learn to fly a glider, you have a little card, and on the card has some very basic skills, and you have to have somebody sign you off on that you've demonstrated that skill.
Really?
Three different people have to have seen you do it. And I think there was a list of about 20 of them. And you had to have 3 people who seen you do each one of those different things before they'd let you go solo.
That's so interesting.
So I introduced the same thing in the School of Coaching. One of them, as a pilot, one of them was fly straight and level, right? When you've got no motor, that's difficult. Fly straight and level.
Yeah.
So 3 people had to see you do that. So, I on our one, you had to be able to manage a conversation without influencing the direction of the conversation. In other words, you had to be able to facilitate the thinking of the other without your thoughts intruding or getting in the way. And you had to have just shown that 3 times. And there were another 15 other things. So you didn't qualify from the School of Coaching unless you could actually coach.
Yeah. How did you come up with those, like 15 or more things?
I think one of the things that I'm good at is making distinctions. There are plenty of people, and I say this without any seeking somebody to contradict me, but I'm not the most intelligent person I've ever met. I'm not stupid, but I've met people who are a lot more smarter than I am. But I've learned to make distinctions, to say this is to ask myself, what is it? What is it not? What is it? What is it not? Until I get to an answer. So it takes me time. But we kind of using things like the GROW model as a starting point, using the idea of non-directive coaching as a starting point. We hammered out a number of things that, and then having conversations with the team at the School of Coaching, we got to a set of skills that you could demonstrate.
Because then what I'm imagining is, if you have these criteria in a way that someone needs to fulfill before they're considered a good coach, that means that there has to be a certain definition or standard of what coaching is. What is that to you? What is good coaching?
Well, I've just re-edited my first book, which was first published in '99, and added to it. And part of it is about trying the first. It's a book in 4 parts, and the first part tries to answer that question. So I could read you the entire first part, which would take the rest of the time we have together. So first of all, and there's a bit of sleight of hand here, because I define coaching in my own terms and then justify that. Justify my own model against
Makes
that.
sense, right?
But yeah, well, but so I'm talking about. So you start with the end in mind. What's effective coaching? What is it that makes it effective? And some of that's quite obvious. That results are achieved, that development happens, that people take responsibility. So you go from obvious to more subtle things, that potential is explored, and what it comes down to is that in order to achieve things like people taking responsibility, people owning the outcomes, people being energized and excited, you can't do that if you're simply shouting at people. So the model says is that it's a predominantly, and I hate the words non-directive, but because so it's a predominantly non-directive approach, where the job of the coach is to facilitate the thinking of the player, the person being coached, because that's the only way in which they build their own authority.
Yeah, I like that. Reminds me of and I don't know where I saw it, but I remember you did you gave a workshop at a tennis court somewhere in England. I don't know when this was. I don't know where I saw this, but it reminded me of that, where you I'm not sure how it went, I wasn't there, but from my understanding, you made people coach tennis players in a way where to teach someone how to play tennis, the skill is a very difficult thing. So it was really about drawing that which the player already has inside them out for them to improve upon something they know more probably better than you do.
So it was part of what we did at the School of Coaching as well, and I still get to do it every now and again, which is that you put somebody in an environment where they don't know what the technique is. So you're putting people who aren't tennis players or aren't tennis coaches onto a tennis court, and at the end of a 3-hour session, they are actually giving tennis lessons. Because and what they discover is that there's a process by which you can release the natural learning capability. So it's not that people have a great tennis player inside waiting to get out. That's romantic Californian bullshit. It's what is so is that people have a capacity to learn very, very quickly when they're in the right environment. So you learn to walk without being taught. You learn to speak and talk without being taught. So why do we suddenly think we need to teach people? So what was tell that to your teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, right. So you know, so when people understand what that process is, they can teach people anything. I've taught people to do rock climbing. I check the newspapers the next day to make sure nobody's falling off a mountain. Yeah. So there's that innate process. So so what I'm saying in the effective coaching model is that if you can't do that, you shouldn't be coaching.
Yeah.
Because the person you're not releasing their potential. You're not helping them stand in their own authority.
I love that. I really like that approach, and I think that is another thing that many coaches in this modern world of coaching, I don't want to call it wrong, but feels they do it differently, where the focus is more on what they know and then can put on the other person to improve the other person. Wow.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that you don't want to make people wrong for that, because they're not. And there's some people who do it really, really well. It's just limited. It's like having a car that has 2-wheel drive when 4-wheel drive is available.
Yeah. So then you would say that niching down for a coach is actually doesn't make sense, because that would mean that, does it? I'm filling things in right now. What's your opinion on niching down as a coach on a certain?
What do you mean by a niche? A niche, as in right. I think that's brilliant, and I think in this to find a niche in which you can operate is a fabulous thing to do, because it's easier to market yourself, it's easier to sell yourself, it's easier to get references, it's easier to demonstrate that you can make a difference. So there are lots of good reasons for doing it. Lots of good reasons for doing it. And I said a predominantly non-directive model, which means that I'm not one of those people who preciously insist on people being only non-directive, because that's absurd. If I'm coaching somebody and I know something or have an observation or some feedback, I'm not going to withhold that. That would be completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
It would just be irresponsible.
Yeah.
Particularly in the world of business. I think in a therapeutic world, you maybe want to stay with the person and their agenda for longer, because you're dealing with some far more powerful forces. In the world of business, where you need to operate more quickly, then if you've got knowledge and experience, that can be really, really useful. Just remember, it's predominantly non-directive. So you get people to a place, and if you can add something of value, then you do. And if you don't, you shut up.
Yeah, that's a good formula. But then wouldn't you say that by picking a niche and going all in on that, you're limiting yourself, because you could do so much more?
Yeah, but I think it's almost like I think there are two parts to that. There's a kind of a business stroke marketing question. And your own interest. So so that so I because the world of coaching and not just coaching, but all kinds of consulting and training are precarious at the moment, because there isn't much money around. That I know people who are specializing much more in. One guy in particularly in sales. He's been he was in sales. He learned his human interactive skills in that way and got interested in that, and kind of that morphed into coaching. And what's happening now is he's going back into sales because he's got a terrific reputation, and he's got knowledge and experience that's very useful. So then that's a business decision he's taken, and it may be that if the climate changes again, let's hope it does, that he'll his niche will open up again. So yeah.
What was that like for you? What was your first target audience? What was your first niche when you started off coaching? Do you remember?
I had the most extraordinary blessing in that the coaching that I really first did professionally was within McKinsey, the global strategic management consultancy. And the great blessing with that was that I got an induction program from them. So before they let me loose inside their business, me and other members of the team in those days, we did a 10-day induction program. And from that, and from being in McKinsey, I learned that in order to be a great coach, you actually needed to be a halfway decent consultant. That you had to be able to account for the context. We can come back to that if we want to. But that was a blessing. I am particularly good in professional service firms because I understand those folk. But I get the most fun. And would love to do more of the work that's where you launch something or create something, or this in this country about 15, no, maybe more, 20 years ago, one of our financial institutions, an outfit called Prudential, who were in the world of insurance, were looking at what else they might do, and they decided to launch a bank. And I worked with the team that launched the bank, and it was just hilarious. It was intense. It was great fun, but everything had a focus. So so it was tight, and that's a fun place to work.
I can imagine so much must have changed, especially for you throughout your career as coaching.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying right there. I don't know. It sounds like a long time ago, which is
it was.
Yeah. What is the biggest change that you've observed when it comes to the way of coaching, and what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, so we were really lucky. We were in there in the early days, in kind of the very late 80s, the early 90s into the early 2000s. And it was, at one level, it was a bit of a wild west, because when we started off, there was almost nobody else doing it. And in a way, we got to define our territory and do what we were doing. We also got to charge quite a large sum of money as the industry grew to a certain point. And then like with anything that like as coaching, anything that emerges like that, it gets regulated. So there was no government level regulation, but two things happened. One, institutions, organizations like the ICF and the EMCC grew up. And that's a double-edged sword, as we've spoken about. But the other thing that happened was that larger organizations started trying to manage the coaching that was happening in their business. Quite rightly, they had to, because they were spending large sums of money and nobody knew who was there and what was being spent on and how good the coaches were. And there were some good coaches and some bad coaches. But the problem was that given that we live in a world in which there aren't consistent definitions of coaching, and very often the people who are in charge of the coaching agenda in larger businesses are relatively young and inexperienced. So they don't actually know what it's like at the top, at the C-suite level. So they don't. It's difficult for them to know if that person sitting in front of them could fit in there. And they will have some definition of coaching, which is, wherever they got it from, I don't know. But it may not be complete, and it may be based on NLP, which is fine, but it's a limited model and wasn't ever designed for coaching in the first place, or some other philosophy. It may be overly psychological. I mean, there are people in those organizations who have run the coach's bench who say that my coaches must have some psychological training. Why? They're not in there to do psychology.
I love that what you said about the NLP. I noticed a bit of a I didn't notice per se like a frustration behind there, but there was a what I'm imagining, and I might be putting my own feelings onto you, is that you've been in this industry for so long, and you notice that it's just, I don't want to say that it's getting ruined, but it's changing so much. Like the way that you've always done it, that's not the way you can do it anymore. Like don't you feel like restrained, or when you're on a call with a guy like me who's 21 and calling himself a coach, don't you feel like, what is he doing? Or do you feel any negativity towards that?
Well, and first of all, to be utterly clear, and if this sounds patronizing, I apologize deeply, but we wouldn't be having the conversation if I didn't feel that when we started talking, and the way your email came through in a very original moment, was that you were somebody I could talk to. So it was, so I'm very quick at making that assessment.
Thank you for that.
Possibly too quick. So do I feel frustration? No, I don't feel frustration with anybody. I'm concerned, saddened a bit, frustrated, yes, a bit, that what is a very fabulous skill set and way of has been kind of diverted somewhere where it doesn't have to be, and where it's very limited, and that kind of that annoys me. That there aren't that that the vast majority of people who lead our businesses don't have coaches. In my view, is a real problem. Who are they talking to? Because you can't you think for yourself, but don't think alone. It's like so it's like who what if I know that anybody I work with, and I'm not particularly talking about how good I am as a coach, but just the very act of people voicing their thinking to another person is significantly important, particularly when they lead an organization on which many thousands of people might depend. And if that person is going around thinking they've got the answers, there's a problem. The prime minister in this country, the idiot, said yesterday, he said, well, I made the decision. It's like, well, hold on, you got a whole team. Why are you making the decision? It's like that's just absurd. You have 20 people sitting around the table and you're making the decision. Get a grip.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there.
So there's the sadness is that human beings aren't working anywhere close to what they're capable of doing, and it's the constraints of a compliant society. It's fear, it's doubt, it's and in some cases just arrogance that stops that stuff from happening. So that's the sadness. I know what great coaching can do, and it's yeah.
So do you feel that a lot of your motivation comes from that place of maybe frustration and sadness about the coaching world right now? That you have the realization, like, oh, if that person only had a coach, is that a big part of where your motivation comes from to be that coach for that person?
Yeah, no, it's not. No, it's not even that. I play tennis, and I play tennis competitively, and we've moved out of London into rural England, which is fantastic. There's less good tennis players around, which is a problem. But when I was back in London, I lived very close to a center of excellence from the Lawn Tennis Association, a center of excellence for kids. So they were all under 16. So there was this kind of this elderly gentleman surrounded by kids, because it was a great place to play, and the coaches were quite good, and I had a good relationship with one or two of the coaches. And I'm sitting there watching these guys, and I don't like some of the way some of them were going about it. Some of them were shouting at kids and getting cross with kids, and that's no way to go about it. And others just were good, but maybe didn't really know how to listen and attend, and were kind of running their lesson plans that had no relationship with the kids' needs. But I actually kind of fell in love with the coaches. They were 90% of them were really. So I offered. I said, I'll give you 4 sessions. So we did 4 2-hour sessions. Some of the coaches hated it. Some of them loved it. But it was my intent was, here are these guys who have these kids around them who are growing up and learning and expressing themselves on the tennis court, and all the non, some of them might become good tennis players. Most of them won't, because the statistics don't allow that to happen. But these guys are being listened to. The kids love them. Let's make sure they do a good job. So that's the motivation.
I like that. That makes it a bit more. It doesn't make it more pure, but that I can see it comes from the heart. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
good way of going about it. What would you? Maybe a weird question, but how did you do that? How do you get to a point where you get to listen to your heart like that, where you actually saw this and were like, yeah, I feel actually genuinely curious and enthusiastic to go about this. That's a big step for many people.
Yeah. There's an expression in English which is "just be yourself," and we throw it at people as if it was like, oh, okay, I missed that completely. I should do that. It takes fucking years to be able to do that, and we don't have. So another book I wrote was called Enabling Genius, and it was the what was behind that book was to see if I got a group of people together to help with the research and to help with the writing and the thinking and all of that. And it was great fun. Over a period of 18 months, we did every kind of research, from reading books to, all the things you might imagine that 80 people could get up to. But the intent was to see if we could identify what people who had demonstrated greatness had done. What was the path that got them there? And was there commonality in the path? And we found some points of commonality. And one of them was about identity. So my game is tennis. You may remember or have seen Federer. And then you may have seen another guy, Nadal. Nadal, Spanish, a bull of a man, very physical, very strong, huge amounts of effort go into everything, and hugely skillful. And then there was this Swiss guy who was light on his feet, elegant, less about power, although there was power, much more about touch and finesse. Completely different, right? Both geniuses, completely different, but they both knew exactly what their on-court identity was, their unique individual genius on the tennis court. And that's a kind of a construct. It's something you make up, and that's really so you need to there are many ways of doing the work that gets you to be able to listen to yourself, and I think and that's one place you can start. The other gift that I had was that in the inner game, in learning to coach and in learning to be an inner game player, the fact that it's a non-directive process, that nobody's telling you what to do, means you have to start making your own distinctions. So when I go to my coach locally here, and he's brilliant, and he can both show me things, but he also knows when to shut up and let me speak. And I can see that he's sometimes surprised at where I say, oh yeah, no, when I did that, I opened the face here, the face of the racket. And he goes, right, because he hadn't seen it. And he's kind of surprised that the person he's working with is feeling. So I've learned since the age of 25 to attend to what I'm doing because of the discipline I went through. I'm not saying I'm clever or special or anything. It was just that was the landscape that I ended up in. And so I'm very attuned to noticing what I'm doing, which both makes me a good tennis player and a good coach, but also then helps me know better when I'm being true to myself or not. And it doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but believe me.
When you talk about the identity, that how much they know themselves, Nadal and Federer, when they're playing tennis, and if you'd relate that to yourself when it comes to coaching, what's your identity as a coach? What are your how do you present yourself on the coaching field? or in a session, or?
But again, it's if you watch people who come from a therapeutic background, and I kind of have to almost play this out, you'll see them sitting back with their notebook. So they're almost leaning away from the person and their head is cocked to a 30-degree angle. And it's like, and it's kind of, there's almost a level of disengagement sometimes. It's not that they're not there. But it's like they're in an observing mode, almost.
Yeah.
If you watch me coach, I am on the front of my seat. I'm almost standing up. I'm 6'2", which isn't huge, but it's big. So when you're with me, you will feel my physical presence, and what that also means is that there's an intensity. So so people get locked in through the eyes, and the world disappears from around us. So there's something about my presence. There's something about the quality of my listening. So I do not move unless I've understood. When I say move, I mean progress in the conversation. My capacity to summarize almost shocks people sometimes, and then so that quality of listening, that quality of understanding, and because I'm so focused on doing that, it actually, ironically, it frees me up. So the focus means that aids with the presence, with the being present, but also means that worry and fear of getting it wrong, all those things tend to disappear. So my intuition then has a chance to come and play. So
yeah.
So I spot stuff. I was with a guy the other day, and I said, and there's more emotion around that than you're telling me or you. And you could see him kind of like, what? And I promise you, I am not being clever. I've just been doing this for 40 years. So I just noticed his Adam's apple bob just briefly when he said something. I thought, oh, okay, this is real. This is serious. And he needed to hear that play back to him because he wasn't taking it seriously.
I think that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So it's about presence. It's about fundamentally, it's about the listening and the understanding.
Yeah.
And then my intuition is such that, God, this sounds so arrogant. I often know people almost better than they know themselves. I often know what they're going to say before they say it, just because I'm fully present.
Yeah. The presence is the presence. That's such a big thing, and to be honest, I think I was taught it in my education to become a coach, but I think I sort of I didn't really pay attention to it. I was like, oh, if I'm there, I'm present, right? Which is absolutely not the case. So it was only until I started to pay attention to that alone and actually try and be present that the game completely changed. And this might be, I'm not even exaggerating, but it was, conversations are so different if you're actually present, and you can serve someone so much better if you are.
But what is vastly underrated is the ability to summarize accurately.
I just wanted to get back onto that.
Because if I've made an accurate summary, and I make sure I do it within the first few minutes of the conversation, the person goes, hell, I'm safe with this guy. He took everything in and remembered it. And it's that sense of being safe means that, oh, so he's got that now. That means that the next thought can come. And that'll be safe too. I can say that to them. And what begins to happen is that, my first job as a coach is to be in flow, be in what we call self-2. My second job is to get the other person into flow, into self-2. And it's that listening that is one of the big parts that allows that to happen, because they stop being worried about what they're saying and how it might be received, and they just start speaking. And that it can be about profound stuff about them as a leader, or it can be simply like, one of my options for improving marketing around here is, and it may be something they wouldn't have said if the room hadn't been open to that.
Yeah. I do feel like what came up when you were saying this is, yes, there's this big shift going on in the world of coaching, but I feel like where the world's moving to, we all have smartphones. Conversations are, not even face to face anymore. You can just send a text. Even the words are not fully spelled anymore. We have like, I'm not sure what the English word is for that, but the way that conversations are being held is so different to having a coaching conversation that, yeah, even the power to just actually listen to someone and reflect back to them what they just said can be such a massive change, and because people don't have conversations like that anymore. So even that is already so powerful. What is the biggest thing you've learned, or what would you say is your biggest tip when it comes to your capacity to summarize what someone says, apart from being present?
It's almost like it's almost like you got to think in bullet points. If I was to present what they've said back in bullet points, what are the 2, 3, 5 things they've said? So I'm kind of going to say, okay, so he's mentioned his relationship with his boss, or her relationship with her boss. She's mentioned the lack of confidence. Okay, 2. Okay, what else? What else? Oh, now she's talking about the future and what her vision is. Okay, so then to be able to go back and say, so your boss, confidence, and where you're headed. They go, yeah. They've been speaking for 10 minutes. and then the next level of that, when you're sufficiently confident and the relationship is strong enough, you can say, and forgive me, but I felt that there was more to be said about where you're headed, or whatever it is that you've then seen or heard or intuited, then you can bring that in. But it's the first bit that's so vital. Just boom, boom, boom.
Intuition plays a big role in the way that you coach, doesn't it?
Massively.
Though I wouldn't wait. No, I'm going to ask it in a question. Is intuition a skill to you?
Yeah, I think intuition is just what happens before our thinking becomes conscious. It's like it's thinking that goes on kind of below the bar, below the line, and it's unique. It is absolutely, and there is a skill of in a coaching conversation of being able to detach yourself for a minute in the conversation and saying, okay, how am I feeling? Feeling uncomfortable. What's that about? Is it about me? Is it about them? And then you might have a thought about them. You say, oh, right, I wonder. And then you go to chat. Am I going to ask that now, or am I going to just sit on it? Nah, I'll sit on it. And then if I hear later on in the conversation something that reflects that again, then I'll say, I've had this thought twice, and I just want to check it with you.
Yeah.
So I just want to check it with you is my declaration of my intent. And when I understand what my intent is, part 1, part 2, declare it. And if it resonates, you're in good shape. Then you move forward.
Yeah.
So
I like that. I like that way of phrasing.
It's a skill and almost like a bit of a process that I go through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the way of applying it then is a skill in itself. When you have that intuitive answer or way of seeing things, to be able to even put that in the conversation without it being about you, or that's a skill onto itself as well.
Yeah. And I think the thing I want to add in for your good friends who are listening is that you can only do that when you have complete confidence in your ability to run a coaching conversation. So, I have a number of models that form a basis that are now completely unconscious, in the same way that driving a car is unconscious, the actual driving of it. And I'm not paying attention, I don't mean that, but the actual driving. Yeah. So I seldom have to think too much about what the next question is. So my attention isn't there.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that, which means my attention is freed up to be put on what I think about something, what I feel about something, what I intuit about something, what I know about the context. And I can briefly go to those places and come back.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to, that's why the grow model for me, that's why it's brilliant. It provides a focus to what my activities are, and it allows me just to not worry about the next question because I know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's powerful. What I've noticed in having so many coaching conversations, and I mean, they won't even be compared to how much you've had, but the way that you get to know yourself and the confidence that comes with it, I feel like that's where the power is, because I know that there will be a question, or there will be a silence, or there will be an answer, and all of those are fine.
That's right.
And I feel like when
That's
you can
brilliant.
hold yourself in that space like that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to ask you a question that I've asked everyone that I've had a conversation with. What is an extraordinary coach to you?
I think the fundamental is that they are somebody who doesn't get confused by all the other things that could be happening and holds you to expressing yourself in the game in which you're playing. So to the highest standards, and when I say expressing yourself, I mean digging into your genius, your potential. And for me, the word genius speaks about the embodiment of your potential. So I'm trying to make potential real and practical. So when I want to talk to them, when I get to talk to somebody about their unique genius as a leader, what I'm trying to do is take it away from what their potential is, which is fantastic and amazing. But let's actually put some clothes on your potential and make it real. And that's what genius is. So an extraordinary coach in my world is somebody who can help you understand that and will not let you waver from that. Many years ago, I did some work with a psychotherapist, and unfortunately she passed away just when things were getting good. And one of the things she said to me quite early on, 3 or 4 sessions in, she looked at me and said, "Myles, I will be dangerous for you." And I almost went cold when she said it. It's like, fuck. And nobody's ever shown me that respect or care or attention, or that was, so it's that. It's like, I'm sorry, yeah, it's holding people to account to their own genius.
I think that's a beautiful definition. Thanks for sharing that. I'm also curious, and this popped up. I've had conversations, and I'm sure you can relate to this. A good coaching conversation, after the conversation or already during, there's that feeling, and like especially when someone has an insight, or when you can see that their world has changed in a certain way, where they either see themselves in like a way brighter light than before, or when you can give them that spark, that gives me a certain spark as well, that feeling. Do you remember a conversation that you've had, a coaching conversation that you want to share, in which your coaching was so on point, like it was so satisfying almost, the way that you hold a conversation? Do you have anything that comes up? What's your favorite coaching story?
I mean, because of my intent, which is to be in self too, and to do my best to enable the other person to get into self too, into flow. That when both of you are in flow, things happen that are no longer about me or you; they're about us, and the conversation happens in in a way that's beyond both of you, and it's beyond either of you's skill. It's a build on both of you, and that happens not infrequently, not always, but not infrequently. And sometimes it's that the person has an insight that they wouldn't have had anyway. And sometimes there was one guy a few years ago, very, very smart, senior person in business and in public life, and we had a long conversation. And he was one of the few people I let do this. When we met, he was a senior partner in a consulting organization, and I had to travel to somewhere in Europe to meet him. And we get there. He understood something about my business, and his first question was always, "So Myles, how's it going?" And I would never let anybody. That's a kind of almost like a boundary issue. It's not relevant to the coaching conversation, so we don't go there. But with him, I knew exactly what his intent was. The intent was to take him away from the craziness of his business life, his office life in that moment. And he was a very good listener. And it would have allowed him to let go of everything else and get fully present so we could have the conversation. And so on this particular occasion, we were off-site in a wonderful, gracious location. And the conversation with me went on for an hour, which I would not let. I knew we had the time, so it was not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a place in understanding what I'm about as a function of that, which was just a new insight. And then I said, okay, so time to talk about you. And he went to a place that he'd never been before. And I think I asked 3 questions over a period of about 2 hours. I summarized a number of times, and he just went deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was one of those conversations where he had revealed so much of himself to himself that I knew we'd never meet again, that the work was done. And sure enough, I wrote to him and said it was one of those conversations. And he said, no, it was the best meeting we've ever had. I'll see you again in a few months' time. And we haven't met since, but we're not supposed to. We're just not supposed to.
Yeah.
He had something about there being a dark side to him that, which for a consultant is always the case. and he got to it. He nailed it. He understood it. And what I enabled him to do was to actually just embrace it and say, yeah, it's true. So what?
Yeah.
In fact, I said that at some point. So it's true. There's a dark side. So what?
Yeah.
And you can see him just go, glorious.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I can see the way you tell it. It's a good memory too.
Yeah.
I like those. I think that's very interesting. There was something that you said in the beginning of it that I wanted to get back on, but I can't remember what it was. But that's fine. Is there anything you wanted to touch upon? Is there anything that you felt like?
No. I was completely relaxed and trusting that you would run the conversation as you saw fit, and you've done that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Real pleasure.
I learned a lot. I wish I had kept track of all the bullet points of the things you touched upon so I could summarize it. it was really too much. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna rewatch this one.
Okay. Been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Total pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you at the next one.